Imagine a wedding night, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight and the heady scent of roses, where vows of forever still echo in the air. For Tiana Caldwell, it was the culmination of a dream she had almost given up on, a second chance at love, stability, and genuine connection. Her husband, Ethan Blackwood, was everything her past had lacked. Charismatic, respected, a beacon of integrity in the legal world, and the author of a best-selling book titled The Transparent Union. He preached communication, trust, and emotional transparency, values that resonated deeply with Tiana, a woman who had known betrayal and deceit. Their courtship was gentle, unhurried, built on emotional intimacy rather than physical desire, a dynamic Ethan attributed to his deep religious convictions and emotional fasting. This unusual approach, while sometimes perplexing, only served to deepen Tiana's trust, reinforcing her belief that she had found a man truly different from the rest. He was a pillar of the legal community, someone who helped other couples stay together. And to Tiana, he was her safe harbor, a man who promised to cherish and protect her with every breath. But beneath this meticulously crafted facade, a secret lay buried, so profound and intimate that it threatened to shatter the very foundations of their union. It was a truth Ethan had kept hidden for his entire life, a truth that, when exposed, would unleash a torrent of confusion, rage, and ultimately tragedy. On their wedding night, in the luxurious suite of the Grandeur Hotel, as Tiana reached out to finally embrace the physical intimacy she had patiently waited for, she discovered the unimaginable. There was nothing. No penis, no testicles, no scars, just smooth, flat skin. The man she had just married, the man who had promised complete transparency, was intersex, a biological reality he had meticulously concealed. In that horrifying moment, the fairy tale shattered, replaced by a chilling reality. The man who had built a career on honesty had woven an intricate web of lies around the most fundamental aspect of his being, stripping Tiana of her agency, her right to informed consent. What transpired next was not a lover's quarrel, but a desperate struggle for truth and freedom. When Tiana attempted to leave, to escape the suffocating weight of this profound deception, Ethan's carefully constructed world began to crumble. He lunged, driven by a lifetime of shame and the terrifying prospect of losing everything: his career, his reputation, his very identity. In the chaotic struggle, a lamp was overturned, plunging the room into half-darkness, the flickering candle on the nightstand casting dancing shadows across the escalating horror. Tiana, desperate to escape, pushed him away. He stumbled, fell backward, and with a sickening crack, the back of his head collided with the edge of a marble coffee table. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Ethan lay still, a thin trail of blood snaking across the pristine marble floor. Within hours of saying "I do," Tiana Caldwell, the radiant bride, found herself in handcuffs, her husband dead, and her world irrevocably destroyed. This wasn't merely a crime of passion, but a raw and brutal collision of identity, deception, and the devastating price of silence. The unfolding events would ignite a national firestorm, forcing society to confront uncomfortable questions about what constitutes consent in a marriage, the ethics of disclosure, and the profound impact of secrets kept too long. It was a tragedy that defied simple answers, a labyrinth of emotional complexities where victim and perpetrator became blurred, and where the truth, when it finally emerged, was far more agonizing than anyone could have imagined. Before the tragic wedding night, Tiana Caldwell was a woman who had learned not to believe in fairy tales. At 29, she had already navigated the painful aftermath of a failed marriage and endured a betrayal that had profoundly shattered her trust. Despite these emotional scars, she had diligently rebuilt her life from the ground up, finding stability in her role as a project manager at a tech company in Charlotte. Her quiet apartment, shared with her cat Luna, and a loyal circle of friends provided a sanctuary where she could slowly mend. Romance, for Tiana, had been carefully shelved, tucked away between the categories of too risky and never again. She was content with her solitude, having come to terms with a life devoid of grand romantic gestures or promises of eternal love. That cautious equilibrium shifted dramatically the day she met Ethan Blackwood. He was, in almost every conceivable way, the antithesis of her ex-husband. At 41, Ethan was a sharp, polished corporate attorney with an unblemished record, a respected figure who had even penned a best-selling book titled The Transparent Union. His public persona was one of unwavering honesty and ethical clarity. He was frequently invited on morning talk shows to offer advice on fostering communication, building trust, and maintaining emotional transparency in relationships. It was ironic then that their paths first intersected not in a courtroom or a literary event, but at a business ethics conference where Tiana's company had set up a booth. Ethan approached her not for the software on display, but, as he later confessed, because he noticed the gentle, almost forced smile she wore despite clearly wishing to be elsewhere. "I could tell you were faking it," he had said, with a confident, almost too perfect grin, "but you were still kind. That's rare these days." Tiana, initially dismissive of what seemed like another smooth-talking professional's small talk, soon found her guard slowly, meticulously lowered. Ethan persisted, inviting her to lunch, sending articles he thought she might enjoy, and leaving voice messages that felt more like quiet, introspective reflections than conventional flirtations. What truly set him apart was his remarkable gentleness. He never pushed boundaries, never imposed physical closeness. He was emotionally available, attentive, and consistently respectful of her space. When Tiana, curious about his restraint, once asked why he never made a move, Ethan would simply reply, "The right connection doesn't need rushing. We're building something sacred, Tiana. Let's protect it." For a woman who had spent years being cheated on and lied to, these words were profoundly healing. They spoke to a deeper connection, a bond built on something more profound than fleeting physical attraction. Their relationship unfolded over 14 months, a period remarkably devoid of any sexual intimacy. At first, Tiana attributed this to Ethan's values. He was, after all, deeply religious and often spoke about preserving intimacy for marriage, coining the term emotional fasting to describe their chaste courtship. While it occasionally stirred her curiosity or a flicker of frustration, Tiana respected his boundary. This wasn't some casual acquaintance from a dating app. This was Ethan Blackwood, a pillar of the legal community, a man dedicated to helping other couples maintain their unions. His public image, his intellectual contributions to marital transparency, and his seemingly devout nature all served to reinforce Tiana's perception of him as a man of exceptional character and integrity. When he finally proposed, on a balcony overlooking Asheville's mountain view, surrounded by twinkling fairy lights and the tender melodies of a string quartet, Tiana's tears flowed freely. It wasn't surprise that brought her to tears, but a profound sense of allowing herself to believe, truly believe, that she had finally been chosen. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Magazine interviews celebrating their union as a beacon of integrity. Premarital counseling sessions where Ethan eloquently articulated his philosophies on honesty. Endless bridal fittings and well wishes from strangers who followed their story online. Their wedding, held on a warm spring afternoon before 100 guests beneath an oak tree draped in silk and flowers, seemed plucked from a dream. Tiana, radiant in ivory, and Ethan, resplendent in a custom charcoal suit, smiled like a man who had won the lottery. Their first dance, to "Can't Help Falling in Love" by Elvis Presley, felt utterly perfect. Everyone present felt it, and Tiana, in the deepest part of her heart, believed it too, until the door to their honeymoon suite closed behind them. She was blissfully unaware that the man she had just married harbored a secret so unimaginable, so intimate, that within a matter of hours, one of them would be dead and the other behind bars. The grandeur of the wedding, with its crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and poetic vows, now stood in stark contrast to the hidden reality that was about to unfold. Even Tiana's mother, typically guarded around men, especially older ones, had been visibly moved by Ethan's vows, where he held Tiana's hands and promised to be her safe harbor and protect her with every breath. Tiana felt as though she were floating, finally having found a man who was not just charming, but solid, dependable, and truly safe. Yet, the subtle anomalies, the small fissures in Ethan's meticulously constructed persona, in hindsight, should have given her pause. The air in the Grandeur Hotel suite was thick with the scent of jasmine and the lingering joy of a perfect wedding day. Tiana Caldwell, dressed in a silk robe, stood by the window, gazing out at the twinkling lights of Savannah. A soft breeze ruffled the curtains, a gentle counterpoint to the nervous flutter in her stomach. Months of patient waiting, of emotional fasting, were about to culminate in the ultimate act of intimacy, a physical union that would finally seal their bond. Ethan Blackwood, having just emerged from the bathroom, was a picture of serene anticipation. He moved with a quiet grace, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made Tiana's heart swell. He placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was both reassuring and deeply respectful. "Are you ready, my love?" he whispered, his voice a low, soothing murmur that promised an eternity of gentle moments. Tiana turned, her hand reaching for his, her fingers tracing the warmth of his skin. This was it. The moment she had patiently awaited, the physical manifestation of the profound connection they had cultivated. As they lay on the crisp white sheets, the soft lamplight casting a warm glow, Tiana's heart pounded with a mixture of excitement and a delicate vulnerability. She moved closer, her fingers tentatively exploring his body, expecting the familiar contours of a man. But what she encountered was not what she anticipated. Her touch met smooth, flat skin where there should have been the distinct, undeniable presence of male anatomy. A cold dread began to creep through her veins, a disorienting sensation that defied logic. She traced the area again, slowly, meticulously, her mind struggling to reconcile what her fingers were telling her with everything she knew, or thought she knew, about Ethan. A sickening jolt went through her. There was nothing. No penis, no testicles, just an unnervingly smooth, unbroken expanse. It was as if he were incomplete, or perhaps not incomplete, but different in a way she could not fathom. Her breath hitched, caught in her throat. Confusion rapidly gave way to a chilling sense of alarm. This was impossible. This was a nightmare. She pulled back abruptly, her eyes wide, scanning his face for an explanation, for some sign that this was a dream, a cruel trick of the light. Ethan's expression, previously serene, now contorted into a mask of abject terror and shame. His eyes, usually so confident and direct, darted away, avoiding her gaze. His lips, which had just whispered vows of eternal love, were pressed into a thin, grim line. "Ethan," Tiana whispered, her voice barely a breath, laced with an escalating horror. What is this?" Her words hung in the air, heavy with accusation and disbelief. It was a question that ripped through the carefully constructed veneer of their relationship, exposing the raw, ugly truth beneath. Ethan flinched, as if struck. His perfect composure, the unflappable demeanor that had impressed her for months, crumbled instantly. He sat up, pulling the sheet defensively around his waist, his body language communicating a desperate, profound shame. The silence that followed, stretched, agonizing and suffocating, punctuated only by Tiana's ragged breathing. Then the confession tumbled out, a torrent of words laced with a lifetime of pain and fear. "Tiana," he began, his voice hoarse, I'm intersex." The word, clinical and stark, hung in the air, an alien concept in the sacred space of their wedding night. He explained that he was born with partial androgen insensitivity syndrome, PAIS, a condition that meant his body couldn't fully respond to male hormones, leading to a development that didn't align with typical male anatomy. He spoke of a lifetime spent in hiding, of doctor's appointments shrouded in secrecy, of the crushing weight of societal expectations. He had undergone multiple surgeries as a child and teenager, not to conform, but to hide, to create an appearance that would allow him to pass as male, to blend seamlessly into a world that had no room for ambiguity. He confessed to fabricating excuses for avoiding shared changing rooms at the gym, for never going to public saunas, for always being the last one to get dressed after a swim. Every anecdote, every carefully constructed alibi from their courtship, now twisted into a sickening tapestry of calculated deception. The emotional fasting, the seemingly devout nature, the deep respect for her boundaries, it all clicked into place, not as noble virtues, but as a meticulously crafted shield. He had not been protecting their sacred bond, he had been protecting his secret. The man who wrote a book on the transparent union had built his entire adult life on a foundation of profound untruth. Tiana felt a wave of nausea. It wasn't just the physical shock, it was the betrayal, deep and lacerating. Every tender moment, every shared laugh, every vulnerable confession she had made to him now felt tainted, retroactively reframed by this monstrous lie. It wasn't just his body he had hidden, it was his entire identity, the very core of his being. And he had allowed her to enter into a marriage, to pledge her life and her future, without the most fundamental piece of information that fundamentally altered the very nature of their union. The pristine image of Ethan Blackwood, the respected attorney, the author, the ideal husband, dissolved into dust before her eyes, revealing a terrified, desperate man trapped by his own elaborate charade. The wedding bells, still faintly echoing in her mind, now sounded like a mocking dirge. The air in the luxurious hotel suite, once filled with the intoxicating scent of jasmine and the soft strains of a wedding waltz, now crackled with a chilling tension. Tiana Caldwell's initial shock morphed swiftly into a searing, righteous anger. The revelation of Ethan Blackwood's intersex condition wasn't merely a physical surprise. It was a profound violation of trust, a calculated deceit that undermined the very foundation of their marriage. How could he, a man who preached transparency and wrote books about honest unions, have concealed such a fundamental truth? Her voice, when it finally emerged, was a raw whisper, laced with disbelief and betrayal. "You lied to me," she breathed, the words heavy with the weight of shattered dreams. Ethan, his face a mask of desperation and terror, scrambled to defend himself, his words a chaotic jumble of apologies and justifications. He pleaded with Tiana to understand, explaining that his entire life had been a performance, a relentless effort to hide a reality that society deemed unacceptable. He spoke of the crushing shame he had carried since childhood, the fear of ridicule, the absolute certainty that no one would ever truly love him if they knew. His career, built on an image of unimpeachable integrity, would crumble. His book, The Transparent Union, would become a cruel joke. He had invested everything into this meticulously constructed facade, and Tiana's discovery threatened to expose it all, leaving him utterly vulnerable, stripped bare of his carefully cultivated identity. "Please, Tiana," he begged, his voice cracking, reaching out for her, but she recoiled from his touch as if burned. You don't understand what this would do to me, to us. My career, my reputation, it would all be destroyed." His eyes, usually so composed, now darted around the room, wild with panic. He wasn't seeing Tiana, his new wife. He was seeing the imminent collapse of his world. His desperation was palpable, a suffocating presence that filled the room. But Tiana couldn't hear his pleas. Her mind raced, replaying every moment of their courtship through the lens of this brutal new truth. The emotional fasting, a convenient shield. His avoidance of physical intimacy, a desperate secret. Every gentle touch, every reassuring word now felt like a manipulative gesture, a carefully orchestrated performance designed to lure her into a marriage built on a lie. She felt used, exploited, reduced to a prop in his elaborate charade. The pain was excruciating, a sharp, twisting knife in her gut. She had given him her trust, her heart, her future, and he had squandered it all on a foundation of deceit. "I can't," Tiana finally managed to say, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "I can't be married to you, not like this." She rose from the bed, her movements stiff with a cold resolve. Her sole instinct was to escape, to put as much distance as possible between herself and the man who had so utterly betrayed her. She began to gather her clothes, her hands fumbling with the silk of her robe, her mind racing with the urgent need to flee. The vision of her mother's beaming face at the ceremony, of Chloe's tearful joy, twisted in her stomach. How could she explain this? How could she ever move past this profound deception? Ethan's composure, already frayed, snapped completely. The fear of exposure was a physical force, driving him to irrational lengths. He lunged, not in anger, but in a desperate, frantic attempt to prevent her from leaving. "No!" he cried, his voice a guttural roar. "You can't leave. You can't tell anyone." He grabbed her arm, his grip surprisingly strong, his fingers digging into her skin. He wasn't thinking, wasn't reasoning. He was reacting out of a lifetime of ingrained fear, a primal terror of his deepest secret being laid bare. Tiana struggled against him, her own fear now escalating into a primal scream. His grip tightened, pulling her back, away from the door, away from any hope of escape. The beautiful wedding suite, moments ago a symbol of their future, had transformed into a cage. The elegant furniture, the plush carpets, the soft lighting, all became menacing, claustrophobic. She could feel the panic rising, a choking sensation in her throat. She wasn't just fighting for physical freedom, she was fighting for her dignity, for the autonomy that had been so cruelly taken from her. In the escalating chaos, a lamp on the bedside table was knocked over, plunging the room into half-darkness. The flickering candlelight from the nightstand cast dancing shadows, distorting their struggling figures, turning the scene into a nightmarish tableau. The scent of jasmine was now overshadowed by the metallic tang of fear. Ethan, desperate, continued to block her path, his body a barrier between Tiana and the door. He was no longer the composed, articulate lawyer. He was a desperate man, cornered, terrified of the consequences of his lifelong secret. He spoke of the North Carolina State Bar, of his clients, of the professional reputation he had spent decades building. He imagined headlines, scandal, the complete and utter ruin of everything he held dear. Tiana pushed back with all her might, her adrenaline surging. She needed to get away. The betrayal was too immense, the deception too profound. She felt a surge of revulsion, a visceral need to be free of him, free of the oppressive lie he embodied. His pleas turned into guttural sounds, his face contorted with a mixture of terror and anguish. He was losing control, and in doing so, losing his careful grip on the secret that had defined his existence. The struggle became a desperate dance of push and pull, a silent battle for control in the confined space of the room. The luxurious objects around them became obstacles, tripping hazards in their violent pas de deux. Tiana could feel the sharp edge of the marble coffee table against her leg as she struggled, reminding her of the cold, hard reality of her situation. She just needed to escape. The struggle in the opulent hotel suite escalated from a desperate argument into a terrifying physical confrontation. Tiana Caldwell, fueled by a visceral need to escape, twisted and pulled against Ethan Blackwood's desperate grip. The earlier tenderness, the vows exchanged just hours before, were a distant, cruel memory. All that remained was the suffocating presence of betrayal and the primal instinct for self-preservation. Ethan, his face contorted by fear and desperation, lunged forward again, blocking her path to the door. "You can't go," he pleaded, his voice a ragged whisper, a ghost of the confident man she had married. "You can't tell anyone. Please, Tiana, you don't understand what this means." But Tiana did understand. She understood the depth of the lie, the sheer audacity of his deception. She understood that her autonomy had been stripped away, her consent rendered meaningless by a secret so profound. Anger, raw and potent, coursed through her veins, overriding all other emotions. She needed to break free, to breathe again, away from the suffocating weight of his presence. She pushed back with all her strength, her body tense, every muscle screaming for release. The beautiful wedding gown, now discarded on the floor, seemed to mock the scene, a stark contrast to the ugliness unfolding. The room, once a symbol of their future, had become a battleground, illuminated by the erratic flicker of a single candle. In her desperate effort to create space, to put distance between herself and the man who was threatening to unravel her entire world, Tiana shoved Ethan with a sudden, forceful push. It was not a calculated act of violence, but a desperate lurch for freedom, a reaction born from terror and a profound sense of violation. Ethan, already off balance from their earlier struggles, stumbled backward. His feet tangled in the thick pile of the rug, and he fell, a sickeningly clumsy descent that seemed to unfold in slow motion. Tiana watched, a horrified spectator to the unraveling tragedy, as his head collided with a sharp, resounding crack against the edge of the ornate marble coffee table. The sound echoed through the suite, stark and final. Then an abrupt, terrifying silence. Ethan lay still, unnaturally so, on the plush carpet. The frantic energy that had filled the room moments before dissipated, replaced by a chilling void. Tiana stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs, her breath caught in her throat. Her eyes fixated on Ethan's still form, on the dark, spreading stain that bloomed quickly on the pristine white carpet beneath his head. Blood, so much blood. A thin, crimson trail snaked from beneath his dark hair, a stark, visceral contrast to the soft, romantic lighting. The reality of what had just happened crashed over her with the force of a tidal wave. This wasn't a nightmare she could wake from. This was real. Ethan was motionless, silent, his desperate pleas replaced by an eerie stillness. A wave of nausea washed over Tiana, her body trembling uncontrollably. She instinctively reached for her phone, her fingers fumbling with the screen. Her mind, reeling from shock, struggled to process the sequence of events. Call for help. She needed help. But who? What would she say? The truth, raw and unbelievable, felt too monstrous to utter. Moments later, the hotel staff, alerted by the sudden silence following the commotion, found Tiana hunched over Ethan's body, tears streaming down her face, murmuring incoherent apologies and explanations. The wedding night, meant to be the culmination of love and commitment, had ended in blood and profound tragedy. The first responders arrived, their faces grim, their movements precise and efficient. Paramedics confirmed what Tiana already knew in the depths of her soul. Ethan Blackwood was dead. The cause was evident, a fatal blow to the back of the head consistent with the impact against the marble table. The arrival of Detective Reynolds transformed the scene from a medical emergency to a crime scene. Tiana, still in a state of profound shock, was immediately the focus of their attention. Her silk robe, once a symbol of intimacy, now felt like a shroud. Her hands, still trembling, were swabbed for evidence. Questions, sharp and insistent, began to pierce through the fog of her trauma. What happened? Why was he dead? Where were the witnesses? Her answers, fragmented and disjointed, tangled with the overwhelming surge of grief, fear, and lingering anger. How could she explain the full, horrifying truth without exposing Ethan's most intimate secret? And would anyone believe her? The full weight of her situation crashed upon her as she was led away, the flashing blue and red lights of emergency vehicles painting the night in an ominous glow. The cuffs clicked around her wrists, cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth of Ethan's hand just hours before. The once magnificent grandeur hotel where she had envisioned a lifetime of happiness now loomed as a grim symbol of shattered dreams and irrevocable loss. She was taken to the precinct, interrogated for hours, her story met with skepticism. The narrative was simple. A bride, on her wedding night, kills her husband. The complexities of identity, consent, and a lifetime of hidden truth were lost in the cold, hard facts of a homicide investigation. The perfect wedding, the fairy tale ending, had morphed into a chilling true crime story, with Tiana Caldwell, the radiant bride, now cast as the primary suspect. The police, their faces impassive, saw only the dead body and the frantic bride, not the years of hidden pain and the profound betrayal that had led to that fatal moment. The aftermath of Ethan Blackwood's death plunged Tiana Caldwell into a nightmarish labyrinth of police interrogation, legal proceedings, and public scrutiny. The immediate hours following the tragedy were a blur of flashing lights, terse questions, and the chilling realization that her wedding night had become a crime scene. Detective Reynolds, a seasoned investigator with a weary gaze, led the initial questioning. Tiana's fragmented account of the struggle, the revelation of Ethan's intersex condition, and her desperate push for freedom were met with a polite but firm skepticism. The police, dealing with a clear case of homicide, focused on the immediate physical evidence: Ethan's fatal head injury, the overturned lamp, and the disarray of the suite. The nuanced complexities of consent, identity, and the profound emotional betrayal were, in their view, secondary to the cold, hard facts of a dead body and a frantic bride. Tiana was formally arrested and charged with voluntary manslaughter. The news exploded across national media, instantly transforming the radiant bride of yesterday into a figure of public fascination and condemnation. Headlines screamed about the fatal wedding night, bride accused of husband's death, and secrets and lies lead to tragedy. Social media erupted with a torrent of speculation, judgment, and sensationalism. Everyone had an opinion, fueled by half-truths and conjecture, most of which painted Tiana as a jilted, perhaps even psychotic wife. Her carefully rebuilt life, her reputation, all shattered in a single catastrophic night. Her family, stunned and heartbroken, rallied around her, securing the services of Amelia Stone, a formidable defense attorney known for her compassionate approach and razor-sharp legal mind. Stone immediately recognized the profound complexity of the case. This wasn't a simple domestic dispute gone wrong. It was a collision of deeply personal secrets and societal expectations. The core of their defense strategy would hinge on Ethan's lifelong deception and Tiana's right to informed consent. They argued that Tiana acted in self-defense, not against a physical assault in the conventional sense, but against a profound psychological and emotional violation that had escalated into a desperate physical struggle. Ethan's attempts to prevent her from leaving, to keep his secret buried, constituted an act of unlawful restraint, giving Tiana the right to use reasonable force. The trial became a national spectacle, covered extensively by news channels and true crime podcasts. The courtroom in Charlotte was packed daily with journalists, legal experts, and curious onlookers. District Attorney Thompson, the lead prosecutor, painted a picture of Tiana as a woman enraged by a perceived slight, who reacted with disproportionate violence. He meticulously presented forensic evidence, emphasizing the force of the blow that killed Ethan, arguing that Tiana's actions far exceeded what was necessary for self-defense. He portrayed Ethan Blackwood publicly as a respected attorney and author, carefully omitting any mention of his intersex condition, citing medical privacy. This strategic omission was a constant battle point for Amelia Stone, who fought tirelessly to introduce the full context of Ethan's deception as central to Tiana's state of mind. The turning point came when Amelia Stone, after weeks of legal maneuvering, successfully argued for the limited disclosure of Ethan Blackwood's intersex condition and his lifelong concealment of it. She did not sensationalize it, but presented it as crucial context for Tiana's panicked reaction. She brought in Professor Evelyn Reed, an expert in ethical consent and psychological trauma, who testified about the profound impact of relational deception, particularly when it involves fundamental aspects of a partner's identity and a person's right to make informed decisions about their marriage. She explained how the revelation of such a deeply hidden truth could trigger a flight or fight response, leading to actions that might otherwise seem disproportionate. Tiana herself took the stand, her voice trembling but resolute. She recounted the events of that night, describing the shock, the feeling of utter betrayal, and the desperate fear that consumed her when Ethan physically restrained her. She spoke not of anger, but of a profound sense of loss and violation, and the terrifying realization that she had been trapped in a lie. Her testimony was raw, emotional, and utterly compelling, allowing the jury to glimpse the terrifying reality of her wedding night. She spoke about his public persona as an expert on the transparent union and the cruel irony of his private life. After weeks of testimony, cross-examinations, and impassioned closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 3 days. The nation held its breath, divided in its opinions. Was Tiana a victim or a murderer? Was Ethan a villain or a man trapped by his own fears? The verdict, when it finally came, was a compromise, reflecting the complexities of the case and the jury's internal struggle. Tiana Caldwell was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. However, in a surprising turn, Judge Eleanor Vance, acknowledging the mitigating circumstances and the profound deception involved, handed down a lenient sentence: 3 years of probation and 12 months of mandatory grief and trauma therapy. Tiana would not serve a single day in prison. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of gasps and relieved sighs. Justice in this intricate case was not about absolute blame, but about acknowledging the tangled web of human frailties that led to a tragic end. The conclusion of the trial marked the end of a harrowing chapter, but for Tiana, the journey towards true resolution had only just begun. The legal battle was over, but the emotional and psychological healing process was a long road ahead. The lenient verdict and the avoidance of prison offered Tiana Caldwell a lifeline, a chance to breathe again after months of suffocating public scrutiny and legal battles. Yet, freedom didn't instantly equate to peace. The ghosts of that wedding night, the chilling discovery, the frantic struggle, and the final, sickening thud lingered in the quiet corners of her mind. The trauma was deep, multifaceted. The betrayal by Ethan, the shocking revelation about his body, and the terrifying experience of being charged with manslaughter. Healing would be a long, arduous journey, but Tiana was, above all, a survivor. She chose to leave Charlotte, a city now imbued with too many painful memories, and settled in the historic, charming city of Savannah. Here, amidst the Spanish moss-draped oaks and the gentle hum of the low country, Tiana sought solace and a fresh start. She immersed herself in therapy, a condition of her probation, delving into the complex layers of her trauma. It was through these sessions that she began to untangle the knots of anger, shame, and confusion that had bound her. She learned to separate Ethan's personal struggles from his deliberate deception, understanding that his lifelong fear of rejection, born from his intersex condition, had driven him to a desperate act of concealment. It didn't excuse his actions, but it provided a fragile, painful context. Tiana found a new voice, literally, through writing. Under a carefully chosen pseudonym, she began to craft narratives that explored themes of identity, trust, and the profound impact of secrets in relationships. Her writing became a therapeutic outlet, a way to process her own experiences and transform her pain into something meaningful. This creative pursuit led her to a unique opportunity: a podcast titled Unveiling Truths, which focused on stories of deception and transparency in human connections. Initially, Tiana joined as a behind-the-scenes contributor, helping to research and structure episodes. But as her confidence grew and her voice strengthened, she found herself stepping into the role of a guest host for a special series on relational consent. On one particularly poignant episode, Tiana, under the pseudonym Anya, shared parts of her story, carefully omitting identifying details but speaking candidly about the devastating impact of undisclosed truths in intimate relationships. She spoke about the vital importance of relational consent transparency, a concept that had been born, in part, from the fallout of her own case. Her anonymity allowed her to speak with an unvarnished honesty that resonated deeply with listeners. The podcast gained a dedicated following, and Tiana, still guarded, found a sense of purpose in helping others navigate similar emotional minefields. The case of Tiana Caldwell and Ethan Blackwood, while legally concluded, left an indelible mark on society. It sparked crucial national conversations about the rights of intersex individuals, the ethics of medical disclosure within relationships, and the very definition of consent in marriage. While a proposed bill, informally dubbed the Caldwell Act, which sought to mandate disclosure of significant medical conditions in marriage, ultimately did not pass in the North Carolina State Senate Judiciary Committee, the public hearing surrounding it marked a historic first. For the first time, open, public discourse addressed the legal and ethical implications of non-disclosure of medical information in a marital union, bringing visibility to issues that had long been shrouded in silence and shame. Professor Evelyn Reed, who testified in Tiana's defense, continued to advocate for clearer legal frameworks around relational consent. In the quiet evenings, Tiana would sometimes sit on her porch, her cat Luna curled at her feet, a warm cup of tea in her hands. The air smelled of salt and distant rain, and the what-ifs about Ethan still lingered, but they no longer felt like sharp knives twisting in her gut. They were softer, echoes, slowly fading with time. She wondered what Ethan might have become if he had chosen a path of honesty, if he had been brave enough to share his truth with the world and allow himself to be loved, intersex and all. Perhaps, she mused, they could have truly built that transparent union he so often preached about. One of the last entries in her personal journal captured her profound shift in perspective. Some people will only ever love you through mirrors, reflections of what they want you to believe. It's not your fault if the mirror breaks, but you can choose what to do with the shards. Tiana learned that redemption wasn't about being found not guilty in a courtroom. It was about reclaiming her narrative, finding her voice, and understanding that she was never the one who should have felt ashamed. Healing, she realized, didn't begin with forgiveness, but with honesty, first with herself, and then, in time, with the world. She closed her journal, set it on the table beside her, and whispered a final, liberating truth to herself. I chose to survive, and that, in the end, was the most profound legacy of all. Not the sensational trial, not the tragic wedding, not even the man who died, but the woman who lived, learned, and found her own unwavering truth.